I mean, my lighting is terrible, I think.
You look like you have the Barbara Streisand Vaseline filter on.
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking Vaseline.
Like the Barbara Streisand effect. So like she never has any wrinkles. She'll be like 125 years old and her face will just look like a baby's. She has the Vaseline effect on.
Now you think that I've downloaded some sort of app or extension for Zoom so that I can
That's
get
exactly what I think.
the Streisand effect.
David's really 75 years old. He just looks really good because of his filter.
Yeah.
Well, happy Monday, everybody. Nice to see you guys. And welcome to the Solid Ground live stream for Monday, January 30th. And it's going to be a good day. David, you want to start us off with description of Solid Ground?
Yeah, let's do it. Thanks. So Solid Ground is a peer support community for anyone concerned about the imposition of critical social justice, aka woke, and or COVID mandates in their workplace, university, children's school, or community. So we offer weekly online peer support groups in which members can share ideas, thoughts, and support for how to navigate the impact of these ideologies and answer the question, where do we go from here? You can join one of our groups for only $5 per month. And to find out, please visit our community website at solidgroundsupport.com. And just to say as well, please note that Solid Ground does not provide psychotherapy or legal advice, and nothing we do should be construed as such.
Excellent. And you can join even more than one group, can't you? We have people who come to several.
Yep.
Yeah. And I love that.
4 groups a week.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So I brought up to you guys before that I thought it would be interesting to talk about the topic of education. And last week I had a conversation with Alex Zeck for his podcast, and that was a great conversation. I really enjoyed talking with him. And one of the questions that he asked me was what I thought about whether higher education is still worth it, given the capture, to whatever extent we see it of this ideology or of higher education by this ideology that we've been discussing. And I sort of gave a quick answer, but I felt like after reflecting on that, it was worth a lot more discussion because it's such a complex topic. And I would love to hear what you guys think of that.
Well, when you say higher, first, can we define higher education? We're talking about liberal arts education versus, I don't know, more vocational, like going to nursing school or something like that.
Well, I think that's a good question. I don't know. Why don't you tease those apart a little bit? Because I think that's part of what makes it so complex, right?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's funny because I'm thinking about this. My kids going to high school. There's 2 high schools here. There's a Voc high school and then a regular high school. I guess it's not really analogous. But I mean, I went to Smith. I went to a liberal arts institution in the early 90s. And I think liberal arts institutions were, I mean, looking back, we see the line back connecting everything now. But back then it seemed like quite a different place than it does now. And I think the draw to more vocational schools. I mean, look, sometimes my kids are like, I want to go to Harvard or I want to go to Stanford. And I'm like, okay. And you might be working at Starbucks for the rest of your life. So I mean, that's pretty harsh. I am just to the audience. I am far more encouraging to my children than that. I'm not that mean. But given how much the education costs and what you get out of it, we are living in a more transactional environment, I think, than we were back in the early 90s. I think the value of a liberal arts education, that's one thing. What is the value of the education? What are you getting for it transactionally? And this notion that the value is you're going to be educated and know how to think and parse things apart, that has obviously left the building. as far as I'm concerned, for liberal arts. So that's no longer even on the table. I think right now people are paying this much money for the names, USC or Smith College or Wellesley. So I don't see a lot of value in it personally, unless the name actually helps you get somewhere, which it might. And I don't think we're teaching, there's a whole lot of deep thinking going on anymore. So my answer is no. Not worth it for liberal arts, but for vocational, yes, because you'll be able to get a job. Hopefully.
A good answer. What do you think, Jennifer?
I think if a person has a relatively high degree of certainty what they want to do with their career, and that career absolutely requires a degree, then I think it's worth it, because that's the only way to fulfill that dream. But if you're not sure and you have the idea that you're just going to college because that's what people do, I think it's a really foolish idea at this point, because I don't think that people leave a four-year institution as a well-rounded critical thinker anymore. I think they're paying exorbitant fees to be indoctrinated into a very narrow ideology. And I think, at around $100,000 a pop, that is a very expensive sleepaway camp for young adults, basically. So I just, unless oh, well, I want to be a doctor, or I want to be an engineer, and obviously I have to receive formal education to practice that. I think it's wasteful.
And it's not even really a fun sleepaway camp anymore. I mean, hear about Stanford. Stanford hates fun, like the rules and procedures the kids have to go through to like create a party. They have to register and like give a list of all the attendees like 2 weeks in advance. I mean, it's just like, it's crazy.
Wow.
There's no spontaneous fun. I mean, look, that's overgeneralizing. I'm sure there's fun, but I know things have changed a lot. The era of safetyism and liabilityism and litigationism and all that litigious environment, that things have changed. And so even as a sleepaway camp.
David, you're currently in school. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I guess I'd echo what's been said, because I'm doing a clinical psychology doctorate, and that's very specific, very vocational. It's got its own brand of sort of ideology that I think a lot of other courses have got, that Jen mentioned. I think, the transactional corporatization of universities and university courses is a problem. I think universities in this country have had problems just during COVID, trying to mandate certain people having to attend for a certain amount of time, because students that were essentially working out that they could do their course from home weren't coming in and using the accommodation that was owned by a lot of the universities in this country, and so therefore the universities were missing out. So the universities mandated people having to come in and pay for the accommodation. So you see there's this vested interest in keeping the universities, I think, sort of ticking over as businesses, which feels like it comes into conflict when they're trying to promote ways of thinking, a bit like an HR department would promote the way you should be in this corporation, the way you should be an ambassador, and think in this way. And that just feels like Jonathan Haidt talks about, completely antithetical to what a university should do, which is to give people the tools to be able to seek their own sort of knowledge base and work things out for themselves, certainly in a liberal society anyway.
Yeah, it's more like they're social justice activist institutes more than liberal arts. It's like more like, here's how we achieve that ideology. It's almost vocational in that sense.
How to
Oh,
become a
yeah,
good
it's the
human.
social justice vocation.
How to become a social justice warrior.
Mhm.
Yeah. How to seek out all the injustices that are everywhere all the time and
Mhm.
spot them all and call them out.
Well, hello to CNY photo video in the chat. Thanks for saying hi and being here. Yeah, I think this is really interesting, that transactional element that you guys are bringing up. One of my first thoughts when I was asked this question last week was about how bloated the undergraduate curriculum has become. So now we've got like, I had read a couple of years ago that now the average undergraduate degree is 5 to 6 years long. And this is that I was really surprised by that. I mean, we really have, it's expanded because of all these extra courses we're expected to take. And it just feels very parasitic. Like we know that there's this system where people are running through this. Yeah, exactly. For the money, people are going to be doing these student loans. It's like monopoly money to them anyway. The weight of that is not going to come home, come to bear for many, many years. And so it's just, well, okay, what do I have to take? Show me what's my transcript that I have to check boxes off of. And so that predates, or I guess maybe it's a side note to this ideological stuff that we're talking about. It's just that sort of transactional element. But in terms of the ideology, it feels like we have lost. And I think, Jennifer, you said something like this to me months ago. You were talking about the dampening of intellectual curiosity that we are experiencing when we're too intimidated to speak freely in a college classroom, because there's one orthodox way to think, and talk about these topics. And it's a completely different culture than the sort of culture I grew up imagining college would be. And indeed, what I experienced to some extent when I was in undergrad, because that was a while back now. I went to a community college in San Antonio that was fantastic. I had some really great classes. We had really rousing, wonderful discussions, great teachers. But then when I came back and I was in grad school a decade later, it's a completely different landscape. So
That's so sad, isn't it? Because it was so, oh gosh, I like, you remember San Antonio. I loved Smith so much. I mean, to think, to come of age. I mean, remember that that's no small part of college, or traditional aged college student going to a liberal arts college, is that and I always thought of it as it's a coming of age experience. I mean, that's where most kids are going or leaving home for the first time to go to their sleepaway camp. And they are literally crafting, or they're developing their identity. And even that word has now been co-opted. So we have res life departments who are devoted to helping students realize their identity, but they mean something very different now from what identity meant when I was in college, like, and building your self-actualization or realization, coming of age, becoming a woman. That was the experience for me. And now it's, here's what you are, here's what your identity is. It's based on these immutable characteristics, and therefore this is who you are. And this is what you must adopt as your identity. That's what it feels like now. And that is so, rather than encouraging students to expand in all areas, not just intellectually, but personally and socially, it feels like a constriction and putting boxes and limitations around. It's the exact opposite. So it's not just a mere stifling of growth. It's an active contraction that's being imposed upon students. And that's really, really sad, because part of who I am today, I have to thank Smith College for that. My experience, and I'm to any Smith College administrator watching this, I'm not talking about you administrators. I'm talking about the entire experience as a whole, within the culture, the other students, the faculty, the way classes were being taught, a little bit of queer theory and feminism, but it was just really the beginnings of that stuff. So I don't think we can ignore that this ideology, when we talk about that's what's going on now, students are being indoctrinated. They're being indoctrinated across the board, not just intellectually in their classes. They're being socially, everything, their entire lives. There's no area that's untouched by this ideology. And so that, in my mind, makes liberal arts colleges even more dangerous. It's not merely you're not learning anything. You're actually, your whole identity is being crafted for you. Everything, all of your social groups, even down to what you think your gender is.
Mm-hmm.
And who you think you are as a person based on your race. That's pretty personal. That's pretty deep. So I see it as danger zone. And I mean, unless you have a kid who's got a real good solid rod inside them, knows who they are, and knows that they're just getting the degree, like Jen said, to check off a box because they want to go do something, if they can withstand that. But I mean, if something that was just in the New York Post was about how some woman from Mount Holyoke, her parents had to hire a deprogrammer for $300 an hour to deprogram her after she went to Mount Holyoke, and she just became a different person. She stopped talking to her family. I mean, this is how deep this goes. This isn't just, you're not learning literature anymore because it's white men. You're being taught to actively hate white men, all white men, not just Mark Twain. White men in your life today, your father, and to believe if you are not white that you are oppressed and you have less chances in life, and all kinds of
and to be fair, it's that those tentacles snake into the public school system right now, and maybe even private schools to whatever extent, but into the K through 12 education system. Those kind of things are I mean, I homeschool my children, and there's a reason for that. I don't want them exposed to this stuff. There's a number of reasons. That's not the only reason, but that is a factor in why I've chosen to homeschool my kids. Don't really want them exposed to this education process that seems like it has been co-opted at this point for things other than preparing you to live a functional and independent adult life equipped with the knowledge of life. Examined life. It's very much in the private schools, Leslie. In fact, that's what Paul Rossi, our sister organization, Terra Firma, that's what he's working on. It's almost like there's another role, I think, that James Lindsay has mentioned, or he's just alluded to, which is it's like a funneling process, and it starts in the private schools, and then you go on to these liberal arts. It's like kind of like an entry into the cultural elite. And the cultural elite is like completely and totally and unapologetically woke, right? So learning this language so that you can be better than there's class issues too. And there's this end, like if I go through this process, I too can be one of the cultural elite and speak in this precious discourse, and other people who don't speak the discourse are, the plebes, the plebeians, and the deplorables are over there. And I have this education, and now I get to go to the cocktail parties, and I know how to talk. It's kind of like, they're kind of like finishing schools for the woke. But it feels like, and now I can go on to work in some corporate or be on the board of some corporation that's super woke, and I can talk the talk. And it's like, that's another function, I think, of these schools. It's not about jobs per se. It's about being in a certain kind of society. But not all finishing.
I love that. Finishing schools for the woke. That is exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that you come out, and whatever sphere you're now operating in, your social sphere or your work sphere, you are now perpetuating more of this ideology.
Yeah, it's like the reproductive process of woke.
Ooh,
the virus.
That's interesting.
So the virus, and it's escaped the lab. The lab was academia, and now it's everywhere. Put your mask
on. Oswald Spengler says, is anyone in this community connected to Oberlin College in any way? Anybody here? No.
No, but I think we are all aware of the Gibson's Bakery
Mhm. Yeah, I have
verdict.
a cousin who went to Oberlin, but otherwise I don't know anything except what we've seen in the news. Randall Sawyer says, I'm wondering if what is happening in academia is parallel to formation of shallow religious institution around misunderstood and ignored spiritual teachings.
Oh my God. Yeah, I think so. Well, even I don't want to talk about religion here. I was just thinking about the the Gnostic Gospels, the scriptures that were hidden in the cave
Mhm.
many years and kept. Yeah, Jen, you probably know about this. Like, I
Mhm.
think, yeah, I mean, okay, so it's about power. It's the whole thing. In fact, most of everything in human life, I think, can be reduced to power. If you go down, if you drill down, like all the movements and things happening. And so if you look at religion and you, for example, the Catholic Church and priests, like that's about power. Like, I'm going to be the mediator between you and God. Like, you can't have direct access to God. I am going to mediate and filter your information, and you have to go through the priest, and then I communicate with God. Like, because you're the lowly plebe. Like, you can't possibly communicate with God. You must go through me, the priest. And so, of course, certain teachings, the tendency is to remain in that power position, to omit them, because some of them might actually empower people. I mean, we could look at that. We talked about psychedelics. I don't know if we talked about psychedelics on the live stream before, but it's the same thing. The mushrooms in Mexico. I know I'm jumping all over the place. This is my mind, but whoever made that statement, I think, yes. I think there is naturally, once there is once power becomes centralized, there's a strong incentive to keep it that way, to maintain the status quo. And if that means omitting things to keep the people that you are supposedly serving, to keep them below you. And so, yeah, I can see parallels with liberal arts. And look at all these administrators we have for DEI stuff, more and more.
Yeah,
right? It's like
very top heavy.
Yeah.
For that, that's interesting what you said about power and human patterns. I just started listening to Jordan Peterson's latest discussion with Joe Rogan. And they start off very early on with a discussion about just that. And he's pointing out that that's kind of the Marxist framework, is that every single relationship is predicated on power dynamics and trying to dominate one another, and how that's not really applicable to a lot of human relationship, but that is applicable to like forms of corruption. And I can't do it justice, but it was an interesting side note.
I think it is applicable to every single human relationship.
Even like a romantic relationship?
Oh yeah.
You think so?
Oh yeah. Yep.
See, now this is an interesting topic. We could go on a tangent.
So most people, when they hear about power, they think something bad. The power is not necessarily, it's not good or bad. It's like a rock on the ground, right? Like, it's just sitting there.
Okay.
What we do with the rock, like pick it up and you pelt somebody over the head and murder them. Now you've done a bad thing with the rock. If you take it and like there's a dam that's burst open and there's a hole, and you put the rock in the hole and stop and get the dam shored up so it doesn't destroy a village. Now you've done something very positive, right? So power in a vacuum is neutral.
Okay.
But so there's always power dynamics going on. Whenever you walk into a room at a party, like subconsciously, you're like shoring yourself up. Like it's very deep and subconscious. And the more you're aware of it, then the more you're able to either use it for evil or use it for good, right? To be very simplistic. But at base, we are apes. If you believe we are descended from apes, which I do. And that's what apes do.
Do you think it's about power, or do you think power dynamics are present? Because I think there's a distinction to be made there.
I think a lot of what we do and the way we behave and the way we interact with people is based on power dynamics. And that's just my experience from me living an examined life. Me having interactions with people, sometimes they don't go well, sometimes they go well, and going back and rethinking what was going on there and what was going on inside me. And I can usually identify, what does it say about me, right? I can usually like think, okay, my ego, what was going on there? What was going on inside me that I felt like I needed to say that? Or why did I get defensive there?
Mhm.
And there's usually, I think, at root something about power.
You
Yeah.
know, I think this is so interesting, and I've spent a lot of time trying to, thinking about these sorts of ideas about what is like, where does evil come from? What does that even mean? What does evil mean? And I think of one of the sort of thoughts I've been kind of mulling on for a while is that evil in the human context, which I guess is the only context. Well, anyway, I could go lots of places with that, but it stems from the desire to control others, the desire to dominate, control others. I know this is a kind of a crazy tangent, but power doesn't necessarily imply control, because it could just be power over oneself, power being to be free from control. And so I think if we're going to talk about power, that can lead into discussions of dominance and control, but it isn't necessarily so. Is that?
I agree. I think you're talking about empowered.
Yeah.
Or how,
yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think when you have somebody who is truly empowered or fully actualized and comfortable with their own power, there will be other people who are threatened by that. It's called tall poppy syndrome.
Okay.
David, I'm sure you've heard of it. You know, like the tallest poppy, you got to chop it down because it's standing up too tall. Yeah. But yeah, that's one thing, looping back to the woke, that I really find horrifying is teaching students what I see as a very disempowering narrative, like where you don't have power. You are either a victim or oppressor, and you have no agency or power over which one you are, because it's based on your skin color. That is putting the power, the locus of the power, somewhere where it doesn't actually reside. And then you're pretending that this is true. This is probably maybe going to be, I'm not going to be able to articulate it. So you're pretending that you are an oppressor or you're not an oppressor based on these characteristics, when the real power stuff, like whether or not you are actually the real locus of the power, is always inside of us. We always do have agency, and we're teaching students that they don't have agency, basically, that they don't have power. It's a disempowering rhetoric, and I find that very disturbing.
I always think of it. Sorry, Jodie. I was going to say, I always think of the expression. What was it? You know who's really got the power in the room when you know who you can't criticize, or you can see where the power in the room is. You know what I mean? You can see where the power in the room is when you know certain people are being told to shut up, pretty much implicitly or explicitly, and that I think that's what the woke thing doesn't realize, is actually where is power actually being located at the moment, because these people are shutting up and scared, and these people believe themselves to be righteously oppressed and deserving of, you know, whatever. So, but I think with power, my thing with power is it does feel too, like it's too heavy with connotation. Like it kind of feels like sometimes talking about power does descend into a kind of simplistic idea of, oh, well, if someone's got power, then they're being deliberate with it, or I don't know, maybe but that's not necessarily what you're saying, Jodie, because you're talking about unconscious power anyway. The fact that we're not conscious about what we're doing most of the time, but we can have the power to reflect and try and make sense of it afterwards. But I do struggle with power, just because for me, my spidey senses start tingling, and I think, oh God, this is postmodernism. But
that's really interesting. Yeah, you clearly articulated what I was talking about with the woke stuff. A good example is this at Smith, when this Black student, the white janitor called campus police because there's a Black student where she wasn't supposed to be, and the Black student made a Facebook post, and it went viral, and this poor oppressed Black student and all these employees got Their lives were upended, these white employees, because of it. And meanwhile, it's all because supposedly we're supposed to think because the student is so oppressed and because they had suffered such a wrong by having campus police called on them. And meanwhile, all these employees' lives are upended. One had to leave the college and never came back. One went to the emergency room. I mean, it was horrifying. And so we're being told that this student has no power. And that's why this is such an awful thing. Yeah. On the surface, that's the story. But when you look at what actually happened, who actually had the power? An entire administration turned on its head to respond to this student and promised initiatives and projects and was willing to throw these employees under the bus, all for the sake of this student. So who really had the power in that situation? Yeah. So there's the surface story that we're supposed to believe, but it's in direct contrast with the actual power dynamics at play. And I think it's very dangerous. I'm going to bring Carl Jung in here because if we aren't trying to be more aware of the actual power dynamics, if we're moving away from that, that's when things get dangerous. That's when we kind of get out of control and these like baser things start to take, when we're not looking at them, right? We're pretending it's something else, but really there's a lot going on over here in the dark. Instead of turning our gaze that way and trying to be more conscious of these unconscious things that we're throwing around. And that's why I think makes this ideology so dangerous. We're not acknowledging what's actually happening. It's not reality. It's not reality.
This brings up an interesting question for me. In that situation at Smith College, the student who was making the complaint, I wonder if the student was aware of the immense power that I think it was a she that she was holding. And I wonder if other people, as they make these complaints about, oh my gosh, I've been oppressed, I've been unfairly treated, this, that, or the other has happened to me. And now I'm expecting this very large and immediate response. Are they aware of the tremendous power that they're wielding? Or are they just so deeply identified with victimhood that they aren't aware?
Good question. You could ask that about look at the Me Too movement. And that's such a good question. Yeah.
It seems like the whole victimhood empire here is based on this foundational concept that there should be some kind of equality and fairness, that we should all have the right to expect certain things. And if we can compare our situation to someone else's, we can understand where we fit in. Have we been wronged, or have we gotten too much? Are we privileged, or are we oppressed, right? And so I guess that is the in that dynamic, in that representation, anything that you are lacking becomes a source of power for you, because you can claim entitlement to that thing. And so the more that you can say I'm lacking, the more entitlements you actually have. And so the more power you have in terms of social currency, because you can legitimately make demands. Mm-hmm. And so the more that you have, the more that you have received, based on this hypothetical social scale, the less power you have, because it's really your job to be prostrating yourself and giving back. And so I guess that's how I sort of visualize that.
Yeah, that's the whole ideology, pretty much. That's
and
crazy.
The way it ties into education is that this is where we're being taught this, and something that I found really shocking when I had taken a departure from education, then I came back, and now this is being taught. I mean, this wasn't here. And like you said, Jody, when you kind of start going back over it, you can say, okay, I can see the roots, how this was coming. But it really felt like there was this acceleration where they didn't show their work. Like, how did we get to where we're just accepting this? Like with every other thing, like, have you ever noticed when you start some liberal arts course of study, when I took sociology, like the first two chapters are why this is legitimate. And here's the basis for this. And here's why we think what we think. And it's like this whole like explanation and apology for itself. Like, this is why you should think this is good. With the woke stuff, we never got any of that. We just got it laid on top of us. It's just like, this is. And there was no demonstration of legitimacy with this. It's just, we think like this now. Okay, I guess we think like this now. Why? Where did it come from? Don't know.
Well, it's not, well, there's another word there, I think. It's not this is, it's this is good.
Yeah.
This is what's good.
Yeah.
And that's how, because then you have people who want to be good, who are being told this is good.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I want to be good. So like, it's like, you almost don't need to show your work, right? It's an inside job, like hooks into that. I want to be good. I mean, so, especially for liberals who are, I was thinking that term, bleeding heart liberal, the other night. My dad used to use that term, and I always get so angry at him. It sounds like you're insulting liberals. I'm a liberal. Now I think I kind of get what he means. I mean, that was taken advantage of, I think, in this case.
I think it's taken advantage of mainline Christians. Not that the evangelicals don't also sometimes fall for this nonsense, but this has really spread throughout the churches as well. And I think the hook is the same. Oh, well, we want to be good. And of course, it does talk about justice in the Bible. And so therefore, this must be the right approach. And then they're trying to pull in woke ideology and wrap it up in Christianity. And there was that church a few months ago. Sorry, I can't talk about it without laughing. Who during Lent hung this enormous sign outside the church saying they were fasting from whiteness during during season. And they,
what does that mean?
Well, I shall tell you.
Do not eat white people for Lent.
That they were doing hymns and hymns, music written by non-white people. So, I mean, imagine driving up to your church, you want to worship God in the presence of community.
Well, and that begs the question, though, when they go back from Lent, are they like, okay, now it's white, it's all white again?
Right.
Well, how do they go back?
Yeah.
Right. But I think it just plays into that, oh my gosh, well, we don't want to miss the boat on this. We want to make sure that we're good. So we're just going to believe as opposed to looking.
It's like the opposite though for Lent. Aren't you supposed to abstain from things you want, right? So it's kind of racist. It's like don't, or not eating things, like don't eat white people, like, so isn't that racist? Like only eat people of color for Lent, like or
well, it's supposed to be something it's supposed to be something that's hard to give up. So like you give up, people give up chocolate, they give up desirable things. So they're saying by fasting from whiteness, they are kind of saying all these lovely white people.
Whiteness is desirable. It's like chocolate. Yeah.
It's
just as good as chocolate.
You say you're looking really great these days. Oh, thanks very much. I'm fasting from whiteness at the moment.
So in the chat, is it Hugh Slalom sends a super chat? Thank you very much. And says, is the spidey sense you're talking about, I think this is for you, David. I think you're the one who said spidey sense. Is the spidey sense you're talking about what reverse racism is? For example, I give power to someone, therefore making me oppressed, but actually making me powerful under the guise of being weak.
Can you read that again?
Yeah, it says, is the spidey sense you're talking about what reverse racism is? For example, I give power to someone, therefore making me oppressed, but actually making me powerful under the guise of being weak.
mean, that is definitely a thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't what my spidey sense was going. I just get a little sort of, my hairs stand on the back of my, I wouldn't say they're spider hairs, but they're on the back of my neck that they prick up whenever I see something that I think, oh, we're now delving slightly into something. Like today, we were talking about how to frame talking to a family in a family therapy sort of setting, and the different ways in which you can do so. And one of them was different questions you can ask on different parts of their system, if you like. And there was just one bit that was addressing power and marginalization. And then afterwards it said questions like asking them about their spirituality, asking about their cultural upbringing, asking about which country they were born in and stuff. And I thought these are all nice things, but the word marginalization is assumed that somehow there's something marginalized here. And that was me just kind of going, there's a slight corruption there. We're not talking about these things from a point of view going, wonderful, let's talk about your culture and we can celebrate your culture. And I'm from a certain culture, you're from a certain culture. We don't know that. It's your culture's been marginalized. And then let's go from here. And you think, hang on, you've already done something. You've already shifted the goalposts. So anyway, that's my spidey senses, because I'm on a course at the minute and I just have to kind of, I feel like, you know, my immune system starts reacting, and maybe sometimes in ways it shouldn't do, but.
Well, and isn't that interesting, David, that would even be something that would be just like normal to suggest that you would talk about with a family, like in the framing of it. I mean, when did that, this is where I'm like, where you didn't show your work. How did this become inserted as this main aspect of exploration for social dynamics? When did this become the way we talk about it? It's just, it slid right in. It's so presumptuous. Yeah.
So presumptuous. I mean, because it just it's just marginalized. I mean, the person you're talking to, maybe they're not white, but they could be, I don't know, billionaires from, I don't know, China or who, I mean, God knows, we have no idea. It's,
yeah. I mean, this marginalizing comes in all forms, I think, as well. Like, I feel like people, even in the room in my course, when we're in a group of 30 of us, people, they don't seem to want to say their opinion. They don't seem empowered to want to talk, because I feel like people are there thinking, if I say something that someone doesn't agree with, or I say something that isn't shared by most of the people, you know, it's about marginalizing of opinion, is it? I don't know. Like, how much does this kind of, yeah, I don't know. I'm probably expanding it a bit too much, but I just think this idea of marginalization and normative and marginalization, those two poles seem to be playing so much, doing so much work on the course sometimes.
well, it's the same thing too. It's like calling something, presuming something to be marginalized when there is actual marginalization going on, as you pointed out, of opinions, or but we're not allowed to actually look at that, because we've decided already this is what marginalization looks like, and this is what everybody must think marginalization looks like. And then it prevents us from seeing actual marginalization. And that goes back to the race thing too, this situation at Smith. By saying this is what racism looks like, what happens when an actual act of racism occurs, such as somebody's denied a job based on their skin color? It almost like not cheapens it, but makes it harder to see, or
it waters it down for sure.
Yeah, it waters down, or sexual harassment, which occurs. But if people are using it, and I have heard people using that cry to literally extract money from people who weren't actually sexually harassed, like, then that makes it so people get cynical and think, oh yeah, another woman claiming sexual harassment, and like rolling their eyes. And it's like, it makes, or like, yeah, another person saying that they're a victim of racism, and, you know, rolling your eyes. It makes it like, it can't possibly be happening all the time everywhere, because if it is, like, it makes it hard to spot when it actually is. It's just a complete looking away from our ability to look at things as they are, by having us follow this, like, no, this is how things are supposed to look, and here's how things are, and then we can't see when actual abuses of power are occurring. We can't see them, or actual marginalization. And it cheapens the word too. Makes it even hard to use these words anymore, because people have an idea of what it means. Instead of
And the
what-
people, oh, sorry, the people that it helps the most are all these DEI consultants and speakers, and people like Ibram X. Kendi, who charge $20,000 for a 1-hour lecture. That's who's really being helped by all of this.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, and that's when bringing that in, that going back to education, when we have, and I keep hearing this from people that I've spoken with, like Christine Siefan said that when she confronted the administration about the social justice curriculum stuff that she was dealing with, she was told, oh, we get a lot of complaints from the professors and we don't necessarily agree with it either, but we have to do it. We have to push it. And this is what Neil said when he confronted the, was it the chancellor or the head of his program? I don't know if you remember me having that conversation with Neil, and he talked about that. He said the guy didn't even agree with it either. He didn't want it, but he had to do it because it was part of his funding. So what the heck is this add-on that is being included in all of our educational processes and in all of our educational institutions from K through 12 all the way through higher ed, that is outside the scope and the desired educational curriculum that the school even wants to put forward. So it's what the heck is it? And as long as it's there, like you said, Jody, it's like this, it's the breeding ground, right? It's like this parasitic thing that's getting in. And when people have to deprogram their children, I don't want to send my children to college. I definitely don't want to send my children to college at this point. I don't know what the options are for people who want to follow some kind of a professional route that requires some higher education and certifications and whatnot. I don't know if we're going to end up just having to be the Wild West of everything, where we just, we're a bunch of autodidacts and we sort of pick and choose based on who we think is, let the market decide. Let market-based factors decide who we're going to go to for XYZ. But I certainly would rather have a doctor who was formally trained. I don't know. I mean, a surgeon, maybe. I don't know. It's a huge question, though.
Yeah, that is a
what?
good question.
You know what's so interesting and ironic about all of this? The woke are so obsessed with power and the use of power, but I've never seen anybody grasp onto power so relentlessly and mercilessly like this, where they are like, no, you have to believe this. You absolutely must believe this. They want to tinker and control the thoughts in our actual brains, what we say, wear your little LGBTQ plus rainbow badge at the office.
Pronouns.
They are wielding power like nobody's business. This is, like Mao's Cultural Revolution going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, very much.
Power. They just want to make sure that they have all of it and that they use it the way they see fit, and that anybody who disagrees will suffer severe consequences, whether if it's reputational damage, career destruction, financial destruction.
Yeah, and they do have a lot of power right now. I hate saying us and them, but every arm of every institution I can think of, just about, and going all the way up to the executive branch of our government. It's very few, I don't know, maybe I'm in a liberal bubble, but the media, it just feels like there's very few outlets that aren't infected either with woke or have become, it's almost like, and then the ones that aren't woke are anti-woke. So in a way, everything's infected with woke.
Yes.
There's nothing pure. There's like no pure places. And I think, that used to be, the family was a separate sphere, the church. We used to have spheres that were not politicized. And now, like Soviet Russia, everything is, like we talked a few weeks ago, even sex, everything
Mhm.
even the most intimate spheres has become politicized and infected by this, either one way or whether you're for it or against it. It's one or
Yeah.
one or the other.
Yeah.
That's
I-
power. That's powerful.
The woke are holding all of the institutional power right now. I don't know how much they're aware of that, because they still seem to think that they are these brave people battling against this. I don't know.
Establishment.
Well,
Because
that's the seat of their power, right?
yeah, they are the establishment.
Yeah, yeah.
They are the establishment. Yes. I don't, yeah, they don't seem to be aware of that, or I don't know. It's weird, right?
Yeah, I don't quite get that piece either.
It's so
Maybe they think
annoying.
Ron DeSantis is, oh my God, until we crush Ron DeSantis, we
None of us can live freely and happily.
What were you going to say, David?
No, I was just going to say it's just annoying listening to people talk about social justice and being feeling so right on, when actually they're just trotting out the same old sort of state sanctioned maxims that they've heard someone else say. So there's
Mhm.
absolutely nothing.
Yeah,
Nothing of value.
it's like revolution. It's revolution by committee. Is what it is.
yeah, there's nothing like, fuck the man about it.
No, it is the man.
It is the man, yeah.
Okay, so I know we have to wrap up. So want to go around and give your final thought? Education, yay, nay, maybe.
Only if absolutely necessary.
Okay.
My final thought, sorry, David, you want to go? 'Cause I'm still,
I was going to say maybe we need, and we also need some alternative kind of like rite of passage for young people who want to leave home, finish school, and then go do something else. Because I feel like that does a lot for higher education, doesn't it?
yeah, I like the autodidact suggestion that you made, Leslie. I think ignite a passion in your children, and that will carry them to follow their curiosity and educate themselves out of passion for the topic, and they'll be okay. Look at Tim Pool. He's an autodidact, right? There's a lot of autodidacts out there.
Mhm.
Maybe he's not the best example, but Albert Einstein.
Gin Bottle says STEM only, the rest is a dumpster fire. So
STEM only. So, what's that?
science, technology,
Engineering.
engineering, math.
Mathematics.
I'm out.
I hear those
I'm
are
out.
getting captured too, though.
Yep.
Yeah. But I think we could talk for hours about this because it's interesting. So we have to chop it off somewhere. We'll stop now, but I guess my final thought is a big maybe, mostly no, leaning towards the no. And definitely if I can dissuade my children at this point, I have two that have already gone through college. But the next two, I will encourage them to pick something vocational. And if the landscape still looks like this when they're getting to that age.
Or just start doing what they want to do. I mean, look
Yeah.
at Woody Allen. The best way to learn something is to love it.
Mhm.
He loved films. He went to a film every single day when he was a child, and then he just started making them.
Mhm.
He didn't go to college.
Well, nice to see you all today. And thank you to everybody who joined us in the chat and was watching the live stream. We'll see you guys next week. We'll be here at about 10:15 Pacific time. What is that? 12:15 noon? No,
1:45.
1:45 Eastern. And
Eastern.
what time GMT?
That would be 5:45, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
And Jen has a group
Yep.
in 13 minutes that you can join.
Yep.
Online
Well-
peer support group.
Oh, and this week I will be gone. I'll be traveling on Friday, so I will miss the group, but I have a wonderful sub. Karen's going to be subbing for me. She's been a regular in the group and she's fantastic. So I think it'll be a good group. And I'll see you guys next week.